So now, having finished part one, we're going to move to part two, the conduct of city government. And if I was fortunate last Wednesday night, December 4th, to have the opportunity to hear now retired United States Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. She recently retired after over 25 years on the Supreme Court following President Reagan's appointment. And her current passion and what she's doing in her retirement is pushing and helping fund a new program called iCivics to help K through 12 students learn about the basics of government. Civics courses are being lost in many of our communities, and she's fighting to put civics back into the schools so that our young citizens can appreciate what this governance business is all about. And in some respects, that's what we're doing today. We're talking some civics on how things work, such as the conduct of city government. And as we talk about your role as a city elected official and what you do as a city, we're often going to go back to our roots back in 1889 when we became a state. In preparing one of these presentations, I just happened to run across reference. This is the telegram from the White House confirming Washington's statehood, in which the Congress had acted and the White House reported to the then governor of the territory that this was that Washington had become a state. Washington became a state during the progressive era of the United States. The progressive era followed the Civil War and all the corruption that you read about or studied in school when government wasn't operating very well, and in some cases dishonestly. And particularly in the western states, there was a reaction against that, a distrust of government, a distrust of big business. And our Washington Constitution is an embodiment of that social activity at the time to react to the corruption and the poor operation of government. And so the populist elements of our Constitution are ever present and are part of our discussions right now in many of the matters that are coming before the Supreme Court. So we'll talk about that more throughout the course of the presentation. For purposes of cities dating back to 1889, the mayor-council form of government is the oldest in Washington, and actually the mayor-council form is also an outcropping or part of the form of the progressive era, as we'll talk about. The mayor-council form of government was available only to most cities from 1889 until 1910, when the commission form of government was authorized. Today, there's only one commission form of city government left in the state, the city of Shelton. When we talk about the mayor-council form of government, we always have to be careful to remind you that just because you're mayor doesn't necessarily mean you have mayoral authority. In a city manager form of government, manager-council form of government, the mayor has no authority other than to preside at meetings. No veto authority. The mayor is just another council member. The city manager is, as we'll talk about, is the CEO. Tacoma is one of those strange examples where there is an independently elected mayor in Tacoma, but the mayor doesn't have any different authority than any other council member except for the mayor's authority to preside at meetings, because the charter of the city of Tacoma sets up a city manager form of government. So even though there is an independently elected mayor, that mayor is basically the same as a council member for all intents and purposes. So let's talk about who does what. Obviously, at the top is the mayor. The mayor will often have an administrator or a supervisor, formally city administrator or city supervisor, but in most of your cities, that position is really a position exercising delegated authority from the independently elected mayor. So again, you have a mayor, and oftentimes in some of the mid-sized cities to larger, obviously, you have a city administrator or city supervisor. Yelm, Renton are examples of communities where you have a full-time city administrator working with a part-time mayor. And as we'll talk about further, of course, we also have the council manager form of government where the council appoints the CEO, the manager. The executive runs the city. The executive is in charge of all administrative activities of the city. It's the chief enforcement officer for the city. The council is the legislative authority. You make the law. You pass the budget. The budget's a law. You only adopt a budget by ordinance. That's as a law, and that's what you do as a council. We'll talk a little bit about the city attorney and special counsel. We're not going to talk about the municipal court system or the judiciary, that other branch of government, but just a reminder that many of you do operate a judicial branch through your municipal courts as well. The issue between mayors and councils, between the executive and the legislative authorities, sometimes can get blurred. And this happens to be a quote from the 2000 version of the council members handbook. The handbook that you'll be seeing in a few months from your organizations will be a combined handbook. But this is a good example of describing the potential blurring of lines between policy and administration. While we can say the council has legislative authority and the mayor has executive authority, and there's no separation or there's no connection between the two, as MRSC or AWC has put out, things do not always run smoothly between the council and city administration. As stated here, a mayor, just as a city manager, can direct that all communications, that includes your communications as a council member, go through the office of the chief executive, the mayor or the council. Many of you will recognize a picture of the senior mayor of Chicago, Richard Daley, not the more recent Richie Daley, who also was mayor of Chicago. You think of Richard Daley as one of those strong mayors dominating the political scene in that particular community. You don't have a lot of that kind of activity going on in Washington cities where the mayor can horse collar or strong arm every council member to do what that mayor wants. And in fact, you have situations where councils react adversely to the activities of a mayor when the mayor is actually exercising the mayor's authority. If you go back and look at the headlines in some of the Seattle papers following Greg Nichols' election to the position of mayor of Seattle, the council was highly critical of Mayor Nichols because he started to assert authority that he had as mayor. The prior mayor had not asserted that authority, let the council do things that were really more administrative than legislative. And they didn't like it when Mayor Nichols decided that he was really going to exercise the authority that he had as mayor of Seattle. Those tensions can arise from time to time. I mentioned earlier that this strong mayor notion, that the mayor is really in charge of all activities of the city, goes back to the Progressive era. Why is that? It is because we had commission forms of government that were so corrupt. The police commissioner took payoffs from the cops and the criminals. The public works commissioner got paid off by the construction trades and the laborers. The finance commissioner got paid off by everybody. Tammany Hall, Chicago, others, examples are just legion across primarily the eastern part of the country. And as a result, this progressive era said, we really should think about what is a better structure of government. And that structure of government that seemed to be working better was that federal model where there is a CEO, a chief executive, the president, where the buck stops. If you want to know what's wrong in your community, you've only got a one-stop shopping to address that. And that is in the office of the mayor. The mayor is the person who is responsible. If there's a problem, you go to the mayor. Sometimes this is seen as autocratic, but the term autocratic is more of a technical term rather than an insulting term. The autocratic mayor, the strong mayor, evolved as a result of the notion that this was a better structure of government. And as noted in this quote from one of the large treatises on municipal law, that efficiency of the public service is of more importance than the haphazard working of democracy in the old way, the form of government that exists in many rural counties still in Washington, where the commissioners are both legislators and executives within their communities. The autocratic mayor came forward, and that's what we've had in Washington since statehood in 1889. Mayors don't necessarily like it. I like this particular piece of news, came out of the Tacoma News Tribune, out of Indian Trail Town, North Carolina, where the town council voted 4-1 to declare Mayor John Quinn's comments about his council in the town newsletter whiny, and to ban his remarks from subsequent issues of the town website. The new policy also prohibited Mayor Quinn from talking to municipal employees unless the town manager is at his side, and requires the mayor to get express permission to enter town hall, except for places open to the general public. This is actually within the authority of a mayor, or as we'll see, a city manager. It's something that you can do in your community with a whiny mayor. Now, under the state statute, the law in a mayor council form of government, there's nothing you do about mayor that is independently elected. In a council manager form of government, you elect your mayor every 2 years. Sometimes the question comes up, we made a mistake. Can you dispose of that mayor, just return that mayor to the council seat? If you think about doing that as a council, be very careful, because there are a couple of examples in the state where that has happened. In Richland, they did it right, and they were able to remove the mayor prior to the end of the mayor's 2-year term and just put him back into his seat as a council member. But also, they tried it in Blaine once without success because they didn't give the mayor an opportunity to be heard and to respond to the council's allegations against him. It is not a simple procedure, so be careful about that as a council. A couple of other examples where mayors get out over their skis a little bit. From the Columbus, Ohio Dispatch, the mayor of Circleville, Ohio, was handcuffed at a fire scene and charged with misconduct. Historic American hotel building gutted. There's the article. The mayor decided he was going to be in charge and run the fire scene, and didn't work very well. You, of course, as a council member, have individual voices, but not when you're representing the city. Here's a headline from the Tri-City Herald back in October of 2009, where the Pasco City Council is reported to have removed its council member representative to the Benton Franklin Council of Governments, because that council member was expressing his or her views and not the views of the council on a particular issue, and this is certainly something within the council's authority. If you send somebody to be your representative, you expect that person to represent your voice. If that person is not your representative, then he or she can do whatever she wants to when she's speaking on public issues. But you as a council do have authority to enforce these kinds of issues. And you see headlines like this from time to time. The Sela mayor not sorry for his questionable comments when he attacked one of the people who spoke at public comment setting, when he said to one of the speakers, "Go get a job and a haircut and come back and see me when you do."